I feel so official with like this microphone. I feel like this is not a video essays channel if I don't have the video essayist microphone. Hi you guys, so this video is a condensed version of my live stream essay where I broke down Lost Records Bloom and Rage, particularly focusing on fatphobia, the history of it, diet culture, and weight stigma in the United States, and how all those topics relate to our protagonist, Swann. So if you want to watch the full essay, it's going to be linked in the description below, but I did also want this project to exist as a video as well. So this is the Spark Notes version of that full presentation. So without further ado, let's get into it. Let me know in the comments or in the chat if you guys have watched my Lost Records Let's Play. But even if you haven't seen my Lost Records Let's Play, I feel like there's a lot of good information and history in this presentation today that I feel like will be applicable regardless if you've seen it. So for those of you who don't know, let's give a little bit of context. Lost Records Bloom and Rage is a narrative-based game by Don't Nod, the studio behind the original Life is Strange. The story follows the life-altering friendship between 14 girls in the summer of 1995. So they reunite for the first time in 27 years to unpack the secrets they buried that summer. So that's like a little bit of a gist of what the game is about. But the way that fatphobia shows up in Lost Records is with our protagonist, Swann. So throughout the story, the teenage version of our protagonist, Swann Holloway, experiences overt and covert fat shaming. So in several scenes, the antagonist, Corey, uses terms like fatty and fatso as a pejorative to demean her. Additionally, Swann's mother also covertly communicates that being in a larger body is a negative thing by buying her teenage daughter a scale and providing diet snacks. Oops, oh my gosh, sorry y'all. And providing diet snacks and suggesting that she watch her calorie intake. I don't know why this like video won't just automatically loop, so I was trying to like read it at the same time while also trying to replay it. That didn't really work out, but it's okay. But anyways, you can kind of see the examples on the side here. So this is the scale that Swann's mother bought her when she was in middle school. She left a little note on these snacks saying they're only 50 calories. And then of course, Corey, the op, doing his insults. So, although the game does take place in the 90s, weight stigma is far from gone. I'm sure many of you have seen headlines in recent years about people using Ozempic and other GLP-1 medications for weight loss. In fact, one of the articles I read in preparation for this essay named fatphobia as the last socially acceptable form of discrimination. And so that is what I want to get into today. All right, I do want to start with some disclaimers though. Discussing food and weight can be triggering, so I do want to put that out there. Please consider if this topic may be sensitive for you to meaningfully engage with right now, and take whatever steps you need to take care of yourself. So I acknowledge that there sometimes can be a patronizing sort of implication of a thin woman speaking on fatness, and so I do want to make it clear that in this essay, I'm particularly pulling from like fat activist voices in order to present the data and research about how fatphobia came to be, the way it continues to impact Western society, and the steps we can take to combat it. And so additionally, I will also be using fat and larger body as neutral terms throughout this presentation, since that language was used frequently in my research on the topic. So, and we'll talk about later about seeing fat as a neutral term, basically. So not being used as an insult. Okay, we're going to go ahead and hop into part one, the basics, the foundation. What is fatphobia and what does it look like? So we're going to first, before we talk about fatphobia, I want to first start with fat shaming, because this is something that people are probably more familiar with as a term versus fatphobia. Like if you haven't been exposed to those types of conversations, you're probably more familiar with fat shaming as a precursor to fatphobia. So fat shame is causing someone in a larger body to feel humiliated by mocking or making critical comments about their size. Oftentimes, fat shaming leads to discrimination against fat people. And some examples of this, one of them, we've already kind of seen Corey in the game. Corey's character uses terms like fatty and fatso as a pejorative to demean Swann. And also, according to another one of my sources, the American Psychological Association, weight-based bullying is the most common type of bullying among children, like school-age children. Lastly, fat shame can also be self-inflicted. So people saying, I feel so fat today, and I put in parentheses derogatory because like I said before, I feel like we're having more conversations now about fat being a neutral term and not used as an insult. But people using fat as an insult is still very much a part of our culture and lexicon today. I was actually remembering, I used to work at a boutique. Some of y'all may have remembered that. And I worked at a women's boutique. And so it was really unfortunate to see how many women would come in and body shame themselves when they were trying on clothes or shopping around, saying things like, oh, I can't wear that, or like, does this make me look big? You know, like things like that. And so it's definitely something that's still relevant to our society today. All right, so now let's go into the definition of fatphobia. So fatphobia is a form of discrimination rooted in cultural beliefs that equate thinness to worth, beauty, and success, while demonizing larger bodies. Although it is not a clinical phobia, it is a social bias that assumes that being fat is inherently bad, unhealthy, or undesirable. While some may dismiss this condition as simply a preference, its impact runs far deeper, contributing to inequality in healthcare, employment, education, and everyday social interactions. So fatphobia shapes the way that we view ourselves and others. Therefore, it is a very real form of discrimination that has real consequences. So some examples of fatphobia, just to give you guys some real world, depictions of what this can look like. Subscribing to diet culture. So diet culture suggests that there are good and bad foods, creating a moral hierarchy around eating and body size. Something we see a lot in our culture or in our language is people seeing food as like a reward or a punishment. So for example, like, oh, I ate a salad today, so I'm gonna like reward myself with like a slice of cake. Things like that. Those things are definitely subscribing to diet culture. So this ideology often sees food as a reward or punishment and kind of creates a moral hierarchy around good or bad eating behaviors. Another example is using thinness as a compliment, saying like, you look great. Have you lost weight? Newsflash, you can compliment somebody without commenting on their body size. You could say, you look great, period, end of sentence. You can also say, I love your outfit. Or I love your hair. Like, you don't have to necessarily comment on somebody's body size to give them a compliment, especially when that is unprovoked. Also, fat characters in media are often depicted as lazy, undesirable, and gluttonous, and may be limited to villainous, comedic, or pitied roles. And I put some examples on the right here. The examples I just gave focus more on like customary forms of social discrimination, which definitely impacts like our psychological well-being. So when you see, movies, examples like this, it may not necessarily like translate in our minds to like real world harm or impact. And so I also want to make sure that I share examples of systemic discrimination as well. Not to say that media examples are not important, because mental health is definitely indicative of physical health, and representation matters. That's something I say a lot. But I do want to also make sure I underline the discriminatory practices that also come alongside fatphobia. Some more examples. So fat people are less likely to get job interviews or be promoted to positions that they're qualified for. Fatness is often seen as contradictory to professionalism, and that's according to one of the books, the Amy Farrell book. Health concerns from fat patients are often misdiagnosed and dismissed by doctors, suggesting that their symptoms are due to fatness alone. And also, insurance companies use high BMI to set more expensive premiums. So these are some examples of systemic ways in our systems, our healthcare system, in education and employment, that also discriminates against people in larger bodies. And now I want to talk about the evolution. How did fatphobia come to be? The history. You guys, we're going to meet the ops. So the first op. is BMI, and especially when BMI collabs with capitalism. That's where they really do some damage. BMI being a body mass index. The next op is diet culture. As you can see, I've provided a picture of Almond Mom to the left here. And last but certainly not least is bigotry. So all of the things: patriarchy, sexism, homophobia, racism, all of the things. So let's first start with some definitions. Body mass index, or BMI, is a measurement system that became an industry-wide standard for medical professionals in the 1980s as a factor in addressing a patient's risk to various diseases. Upon its implementation in medicine, the index served as a way to determine a range of healthy weights for a given height, and is where terms like underweight, overweight, and obese stem from. However, BMI is tremendously flawed. So we're going to do a little bit of a story time of how BMI met capitalism. So the information that I pulled here is from the National Library of Medicine. The article is called "The History and Faults of the Body Mass Index and Where to Look Next." I'm going to read you guys just verbatim an excerpt. Adolf Quetelet, the man on the left, a Belgian statistician, mathematician, and astronomer, was inspired by his passion for statistical analysis and bell-shaped curves to establish quantifiable characteristics of the quote-unquote normal man. Thus, Quetelet index was born. Weight divided by height squared. In the 1950s, Louis I. Dublin, statistician and vice president of Metropolitan Life Insurance Company, established tables of normal weights for clients after the company noted that more and more claims were coming from their obese policyholders. In 1972, physiologist Ancel Keys built upon the work of the Adolf Quetelet index. He officially coined the term body mass index and provided evidence to support its current usage with his 1972 study, in which he analyzed 12 samples of 7,426 quote-unquote healthy men. Keys emphasized the convenience and ease of using BMI in population studies to analyze data. In 1997, the World Health Organization consultation formally recognized obesity as a global epidemic. BMI now exists on almost all electronic medical records and is used as a factor in assessing various disease risks, and is commonly known to most adults and children in the US. So not only was BMI not even really created by anybody with any medical background or knowledge, but we can also see the monetary exploitation that was very much associated with BMI. Some of the flaws with BMI. The term BMI, although it was created by Quetelet, the guy on the far left, Ancel Keys is the one who modernized it with his study of 7,000 men and decided to use the term body mass index. So no women were studied in those 7,000 people. All of the participants were in different age ranges. The majority of the study's participants were European men. The South African and Asian populations that were studied made up 1.56% and 13.9% of the sample group, respectively. And no Indigenous or Latino populations were studied. So these are just some of the many flaws. Today, BMI is purportedly being used to assess disease risk, such as cardiovascular disease, hypertension, insulin resistance, and diabetes. However, this system has missed the mark many times. And I provided some examples of ways that BMI is not working in the way of actually telling us about our health outcomes and our health risks. For instance, Asians have a high risk of type 2 diabetes, mellitus, and cardiovascular disease at BMIs lower than the overweight cutoff point. Patients with increased muscle mass tend to fall in the overweight category because BMI does not properly assess body fat and muscle mass. So you could be, built, you could be ripped, you could be, Michael B. Jordan, and you could be considered overweight because BMI is not distinguishing the muscle mass from the body fat. BMI also does not distinguish gluteofemoral fat, which is fat stored in the hips and the thighs, from abdominal fat, which is fat stored in the stomach or the tummy. which is an important distinction because abdominal fat is associated with insulin resistance, metabolic disease, and cardiovascular complications. In a 2014 study, men were found to have higher cardiovascular disease mortality than women in all 4 BMI categories. Women tend to carry excess gluteofemoral fat, so like I said, fat stored in the hips and the thighs, while men tend to carry excess abdominal fat, so fat in the tummy, meaning the current BMI scale is likely an inaccurate representation of women's health status and disease risks. And I think it's safe to say we all know why using a mostly homogenous sample group of people is problematic, because look at all these examples of things that get overlooked when we don't use a diverse sample group and decide to make BMI the standard for the globe. BMI also does not detect high abdominal adiposity, which is found to be associated with health issues like cardiovascular disease, hypertension, insulin resistance, and diabetes. In a 2010 study, Black girls had significantly higher BMIs than white girls. However, the prevalence of adiposity was not significantly different between the two groups. BMI is missing the mark on all the different levels. It is missing all of our health concerns. Keyes actually did not intend on implementing BMI for medical use. He was a physiologist intrigued by the human body and its statistical analysis. Keyes even stated, and I quote, "The best relative weight index is the one that shows the least correlation with body height and the highest correlation with independent measures of body fatness." So even he admitted that this was a flawed system. So that's a little bit, the history about BMI in particular. I found a lot of that information pretty shocking. Like the fact that BMI is so insidious in our culture, in our language, in our understanding of health. Like this information about the truth about BMI definitely needs to get out there. So most of us are familiar with BMI and obesity today, but how come Westerners were dieting before obesity was ever a term? Diet culture existed long before the World Health Organization even declared an obesity epidemic. And so now we're going to go through some of the reasonings Americans have been dieting throughout history. And this is where our second and third op, diet culture and bigotry, come in. Be sure to check out the original live stream to see how patriarchy, homophobia, and the transatlantic slave trade all have to do with the origins of diet culture in the Western world. There were some really phenomenal sources here, but I decided to cut this part out just for time's sake of this video, but definitely crucial, I think, for understanding this topic through a intersectional lens. Y'all already know the link is, so go check it out later. So yes, y'all, racism strikes again. Are we surprised? To quote Desiree Birch, who was the interviewer in the previous video, the original body shaming was shaming specifically the Black body and associating it with a certain amount of gluttony. And I don't know, that just definitely, that definitely hit me. Very much like the physical body, they saw as a external reflection of one's morality, if you will. The question that I want to ask you guys and get your kind of input on is understanding that no group is a monolith. How is weight stigma typically experienced within your gender, age, culture, or community? So I gave different categories to give people and I to give you guys some time to think about, I guess, what you would want to chime in on. Fatphobia, it is pervasive and it impacts, the ramifications impact everyone, but I think it's interesting to see how different parts of our identity or demographics affect the way that we experience it. Shemjem says, I'm Black, Caribbean descent, always talking about weight unprovoked. I just got back from visiting home in NYC this weekend. I had to get on my mom's ass about that. Yeah, I feel like, I don't know if it's an immigrant thing. I feel like a lot of different kind of community. I've heard similar things in a lot of different communities. Folks love to be talking about oh my gosh, you look like this since the last time I saw you. Why does everything have to be about the way that I look? Hello? TC says, after I have my third baby and I hadn't seen my uncle in 2 years, and the first time I seen him, he says, damn, you put on some weight. You made a whole child. But also, even if you didn't make a child, it's and how about you mind your business? And damn, you put on some attitude. That's what I'm gonna say. It's the unprovoked weight comments for me. Like, hello. Jem says, I feel like it's a push and pull of not being too big or too small. Weight loss has always seen as a positive. My years long bulimia went unnoticed when I was 14 to 19. They just thought weight loss was great. That's actually a great point of also how like society literally like rewards you for weight loss, regardless if it is actually you're in a healthy body or no. Society glamorizes and puts thinness in such high regard by literal like any means necessary. Like people don't even consider if you're have disordered eating. They don't consider if you're sick, if you're even in a healthy body. And so that's why I feel like it is so important that we like I was saying before, like dismantle things like BMI, the lies about it. It's not even based on like truth or facts or health. It's based on our social standards and stigmas and beliefs about what bodies are quote unquote good bodies. So I kind of want to connect this back to Lost Records, in this idea of kind of what does any of this have to do with the game? And to be honest, not much. In the sense of fatphobia is not a central component to, you know, the plot of Lost Records. But the gaming industry at large is increasingly using this medium to reflect our society. And I do appreciate the writers giving the protagonist, Swann, a larger body and also choosing to use certain dialogue and environmental factors to reflect related social stigmas, such as weight bias and diet culture. So yeah, I kind of formatted this essay to explain why our current understanding of fatness is what it is and kind of have you thinking differently about fat as only something that is derogatory. At this point in the presentation, one of my viewers decided to call in and share her experience. And so I'm going to play some excerpts from our conversation. Anyway, it's great to hear you, like your voice.
Thank you.
So yeah, what do you want to chat about? I know you said you was walking, so let me know like what specifically, like which question that you wanted to, I guess, get more into.
Well, I can give insight because I am someone that is on a GL1P. I am on Zipbound, and I personally don't mind sharing that I'm on that, but I do have a lot of friends that don't want to share that they're on that just because the backlash that you face because you're on a weight loss medication. I think people don't understand that it's a tool. It's not really going to help you lose weight, just taking the shot. You still can't just eat whatever you want or do whatever you want and not exercise. You're not going to lose weight. There's a lot of comparison of I did it natural versus you didn't, which I feel like they're all natural because you still have to put in the work regardless of how you choose to lose the weight.
That is actually a good point. And I do think one of the reasons I wanted to do this presentation is also because I wanted to focus to be on fatphobia and that being the problem. Everybody has their own like health journey of like why they're losing weight and things like that. So I didn't want that to be the focus of like this presentation. But yeah, I do appreciate you for like sharing that. And it definitely can be like a tool to like reach your goals, you know, for your health.
Oh yeah, and even to discuss the BMI, after I had my last child, I was at risk for high blood pressure. I had developed preeclampsia, and a lot of doctors were blaming it just weight, 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 weight. And I'm like, I just changed a little bit of my diet. This is before I even started the weight loss medication, and my blood pressure is good. I'm not on blood pressure meds or anything. And I know people smaller than me that are on blood pressure medications. It had nothing to do with their BMI. That's just what happened. They just developed high blood pressure just from maybe their diet. Maybe they didn't gain weight, but eating a lot of salt and everything. But it's just always your weight is everything. Even when I go to the doctor now and I'm discussing things with her and she'll be like, well, weight causes all of these things. And I'm like, no, I mean, I know people that are skinny that are diabetic. And if we're just going to say you're at risk for diabetes because you're bigger, I know bigger people that are not diabetic, do not have heart problems. And then also, I watch a lot of 600-Pound Life. And that's where I say like the mental illness comes into it, because a lot of these people that are on the show talk about things that happen in their childhood and how it affects them, and they never dealt with it. So food is comfort. Food has been there for them in ways that people haven't. And people just, they're like, you're lazy, but I'm like, no, they have a mental thing going on. They're fighting daily with no help.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of want to take on that social work, because I feel like I can advocate for these people, because nobody is. They're just looking at them like they're fat and lazy. And that's not the case for a lot of people.
It's definitely important to like take a step back and look at things more holistically and all like the different factors that contribute to like why somebody might have the body that they do. And also, you can't, like you were saying, like you cannot just look at somebody and tell if they're skinny or if they're healthy or not. They could be skinny and have, problems as well. So health challenges. So that's definitely important. Well, okay. I really appreciate you tuning in. It was great hearing your voice.
Yeah, no
problem. Sounds good. I'm gonna go ahead and end out the stream. So last but certainly not least, I want to talk about mitigating fat phobia. I honestly am under the impression that fat phobia seems to be a modern kind of eugenics in a way. But instead of managing the population through like breeding out the things we don't want, fat phobia seeks to eradicate larger bodies through perpetual body shaming, discriminatory practices, and consumerism. People are going under the knife, doing liposuction, taking Ozempic, Wegovy, and other GLP-1 medications, not only because of health concerns, but for social mobility. And honestly, I can't fully blame people, especially when they've been like body shamed like basically their entire lives. So I understand people just wanting to like get an out. So that part I definitely understand. But I do think it's important that we remember that bigotry, diet culture, and fat phobia all preceded any sort of medical discoveries about weight-related health concerns. And so I feel like the social mobility component of weight loss, people don't nearly consider enough. So how to mitigate fat phobia? So I wrote a list down. So number 1 is validate its existence. So fat phobia is often dismissed and even seen as mystified oppression because fatness is often perceived as a personal choice and not a social justice issue. Even if someone in a larger body is experiencing conditions like diabetes, hypertension, or cardiovascular disease, the ideology that fatness is a choice propels a narrative that fat people are deserving of disease since they quote unquote did it to themselves. And we don't have the same perception about other diseases like cancer, for instance. And also, in addition, there are a myriad of other reasons why someone might have the body that they do that might not have anything to do with their eating habits. So it's important to kind of check our biases when it comes to that. Dismantling fat phobia is a social justice and it is a health issue. The next thing we can do to mitigate fat phobia is be a proponent for authentic representation. So I think it's so important that we normalize different bodies in media for people of all genders. The ad, the campaign, the TV show, the documentary should not always be focused on the person's weight or body size. Like we should see large people with larger bodies being protagonists in just regular TV shows, having nuanced stories, being the love interest, going through like heartbreak, like just the regular everyday people stuff, having families, living normal everyday lives. Like I think that's what contributes to normalization. Another thing we can do is change our language. So stop using terms like fat as an insult and skinny as a compliment. I think it is helpful that we see these as neutral terms and we use these terms as adjectives. And I think it's also important that we break up with fatphobic rules such as, oh, I can't wear that unless I lose 10 pounds, or I'm only going to wear black because black is a slimming color, or I can't wear patterns because it's going to make me look larger. These are all results of fat phobia and diet culture. And something I also forgot to mention while we were talking about the way that the patriarchy intersects with diet culture is also how diet culture is very thin white women centric, and that's definitely not a coincidence. And like Dr. Sabrina Strings was explaining, can definitely be rooted and traced back to the transatlantic slave trade. Another important thing is to mind our business. We've had some great examples in the chat of this, but I think a great rule we can go by is if someone cannot change something about their appearance in 5 minutes or less, don't make a comment about it. Matter of fact, don't comment about other people's bodies unprovoked, because you never know what somebody is going through and how your well-meaning comment might affect them. Another thing is to address ableism. So another thing to, keep in mind is that a larger body might, but is not always, be linked to a disability or some kind of chronic illness. So being in recovery or otherwise having struggles with executive functioning can result in trouble managing care tasks like eating, which could potentially affect one's weight or body size. Another important thing to even think about is like eating disorder recovery. You don't know what somebody is going through, and so it's important to just consider those different perspectives before you're, thinking about somebody's weight in a particular way. But the next thing, the second to last thing, is take on a new perspective when it comes to diet and exercise. So think of things like food is fuel. There are also no quote unquote good or bad foods. You can listen to fat activist voices. Some of them we've talked about, Health at Every Size. There's also one called NAFA, National Association for Fat Acceptance, something along those lines. Sonia Renee Taylor, she's a great voice. I mean, her stuff is about more than just fat activism, but just like body positivity in general. The Body Is Not Apology, that's her book. Virgie Tovar is a Latina fat activist voice that I came across in my research. And so there's a lot of voices. Find people that resonate with you. Practice body positivity or body neutrality. For those of you who don't know, body neutrality is a term that focuses more on seeing bodies as neutral and not as good or bad. It's kind of focusing on what your body does versus how it looks. And so it's like removing the morality and the stigma around it. But back to my point. I'm on the second to last bullet point about taking on a new perspective about diet and exercise. Another thing is you can develop a non-scale victory approach with nutrition and exercise, as opposed to going to the gym because you want to weigh a certain amount of weight. Go to the gym because I want to feel stronger. Find like other ways that are not determined on like a numerical weight to be your motivations for things like going to the gym and things like that. What else? You can also participate in everyday activism. So some of the stuff we've discussed before, or you can do little things like shopping at size inclusive stores. Well, maybe that's not like a little thing. Listen, we want to show these brands of what we actually value. And last but certainly not least, this is one that I feel like we need to scream to the government officials. But being an advocate for health equity and holistic health, I think, is so important. So I think medical professionals definitely need to be educated about fatphobia. There is a lot of cases of medical providers that have caused harm by only being trained to see fatness as like an epidemic that needs to be cured. I also think access to nutritional information and healthy foods should not be determinant on income level. We need to get rid of food deserts. We need to also be advocates for providing government funding for things that promote movement. So things like public parks, rec centers, walkable cities and neighborhoods, having bike lanes, sidewalks, accessible public transportation, things like that. Mental health care should be affordable and accessible to everyone. Bullying, shaming, and bigotry causes poor mental and physical health outcomes. And also, I think we should be investing in third places for mutual aid, communal care, community and well-being, all those types of things. Basically, I feel like instead of wondering why the US has an quote unquote obesity epidemic, we need to be, adamant about dismantling fatphobia and promoting holistic health. And maybe we'll actually see better health outcomes that are not dependent on BMI and in body size, but actual health of people. I'm gonna go ahead and end this video off right here. Thank you all so much for watching. Like I said at the beginning, if you want to see the full live stream, the full presentation, that's gonna be linked down below. Some of the parts that were cut out of this video are things like how various forms of oppression relate to fatphobia. I also give some more pop culture examples and also go more into detail about how to mitigate fatphobia and things along those lines. So you just get the more extended version of things. If you are interested in taking your learning a step further, I'm gonna go ahead and leave my sources in the description, so go ahead and check that out. I'm actually trying out something new. I want to start putting my video essay sources on Substack, and so if you are interested in my analytical, journalistic content like this, go ahead and subscribe for free on Substack. All you have to do is put in your email address, and every time I put up a new video essay or social commentary video, it should go straight to your inbox. Because y'all know these apps be playing games. So follow me on Substack. We're trying something new. And I think I want to go back and add my previous video essays to my Substack as well. So that'll be a project for me in the future. But all right, with that said, go ahead and leave a comment below about what you learned today or other topics you took away from Lost Records. Because maybe I can do a follow-up commentary video. My name's Asmara, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye everyone.